Somewhere inside a quiet lab in China, a team of engineers is working on something that could quietly reshape the entire global technology order. They are not building another chatbot or another flashy app. They are building a piece of silicon, and if they succeed, the balance of power in artificial intelligence could shift in ways almost nobody is prepared for. Stay until the end, because the final part of this story connects directly to what happens next in your own digital life. Before we go further, if you care about the future of technology, artificial intelligence, and the invisible war being fought over computer chips, hit that subscribe button right now. This channel breaks down the stories that mainstream media glosses over, the stories hiding in plain sight behind press releases and stock tickers. Turn on notifications too, because what we are about to explain today is only the beginning of a much bigger and much stranger story. Now let's get into it. The company at the center of this story is DeepSeek, a Chinese artificial intelligence startup that shocked the world earlier with a model that rivaled the biggest names in the industry at a fraction of the expected cost. DeepSeek became a household name almost overnight, sending shockwaves through stock markets and forcing American tech giants to rethink their assumptions. But behind the scenes, DeepSeek has quietly moved on to its next project, one that is far more ambitious and far more consequential than another chatbot update. According to reporting from Reuters, DeepSeek is now developing its own inference chip, a custom piece of hardware designed specifically to run trained AI models rather than to train them. To understand why this matters, you first need to understand the difference between training and inference. Training is the expensive, computationally brutal process of teaching an AI model from scratch, feeding it oceans of data until it learns patterns, language, and reasoning. Inference is what happens after that training is complete, when the model is actually being used to answer questions, generate images, or make decisions in the real world. Every single time you ask an AI a question, that is inference happening in real time. And it turns out this stage is becoming the most expensive and most strategically important part of the entire AI pipeline. For years, the assumption was simple. Training was the hard part, and inference was just the easy afterthought. That assumption has completely collapsed. As AI adoption exploded across industries, companies discovered that inference costs scale with every single user interaction, every single query, every single generated response. Suddenly, the real battlefield was not just about who could build the smartest model, but about who could run that model billions of times a day without going bankrupt on electricity and hardware costs. This is exactly the problem DeepSeek is trying to solve with its own chip. Right now, DeepSeek and virtually every other AI company on Earth depends heavily on Nvidia for the graphics processing units that power both training and inference. Nvidia's dominance is so total that the company briefly became one of the most valuable corporations in human history, almost entirely on the back of AI demand. But for a Chinese company, that dependence on an American chipmaker is not just a business risk, it is a national vulnerability. The United States government has spent years tightening export controls on advanced semiconductors, specifically targeting China's ability to access the most powerful Nvidia chips. Each new restriction forces Chinese companies to either find workarounds, buy smuggled or gray market hardware, or build their own alternatives from scratch. DeepSeek's move toward a custom inference chip fits directly into this larger pattern of Chinese firms trying to insulate themselves from a supply chain that could be cut off at any moment by political decisions made thousands of miles away in Washington. Interestingly, DeepSeek is not only trying to reduce its reliance on Nvidia, but reportedly also on Huawei, another major Chinese hardware manufacturer that has been positioning itself as the domestic alternative to American chips. This detail is important because it reveals something deeper about the strategy at play. DeepSeek does not simply want a Chinese-made chip to replace an American one. It wants a chip built specifically for its own models, tuned to its own architecture, controlled entirely on its own terms. Think about what that level of control actually means. When you rely on someone else's hardware, you are always operating within the boundaries that hardware allows. But when you design your own chip specifically for your own AI models, you can optimize every layer of the system. The way memory moves, the way computations are parallelized, the way power is distributed during heavy inference loads. This is the same strategic logic that pushed Google to build its own custom AI chips years ago, and it is the same logic now pulling in some of the biggest names in the industry, including Anthropic, which according to reporting has begun preliminary discussions with Samsung Electronics about building its own custom AI accelerator using advanced 2-nanometer manufacturing technology. So this is not just a DeepSeek story. This is a story about the entire AI industry realizing that owning your own silicon is no longer optional. It is existential. The companies that fail to secure their own hardware pipeline risk being at the mercy of suppliers, price hikes, export bans, and geopolitical tensions completely outside their control. The companies that succeed in building their own chips gain something incredibly rare in this industry: independence. Now, let's talk about why this specific move by DeepSeek should make people in the United States pay very close attention. For the past few years, the entire strategy of American export controls has rested on one core assumption: that China simply cannot match the technical sophistication needed to design and manufacture cutting-edge AI chips on its own. That assumption already took one major hit when DeepSeek released an AI model that performed remarkably well, despite supposedly being trained with fewer resources than its American competitors. If DeepSeek now succeeds in designing a competitive inference chip, that assumption takes an even bigger hit. According to the reporting, this chip project is still in its early stages, and there are enormous hurdles ahead. Designing a chip is one enormous mountain to climb, but actually manufacturing that chip at scale is an entirely different and arguably even taller mountain. Advanced chip manufacturing requires extreme ultraviolet lithography machines, a technology so specialized that only a single company in the world, the Dutch firm ASML, currently produces the equipment capable of making the most advanced chips. Export restrictions have already limited China's access to this exact machinery, which means even if DeepSeek designs a brilliant chip on paper, actually producing it at the scale needed for global AI infrastructure remains deeply uncertain. This is where the story gets genuinely tense, because it turns into a race against time on multiple fronts simultaneously. On one side, American export controls keep tightening, trying to slow down Chinese access to the most advanced chip-making tools. On the other side, Chinese companies keep innovating around those restrictions, finding new architectures, new manufacturing partnerships, and new domestic suppliers willing to take on the challenge. Every restriction from Washington triggers a new wave of innovation in Beijing, and every breakthrough in Beijing triggers renewed anxiety in Washington. Neither side appears willing to back down, and both sides know that whoever controls the chip supply chain effectively controls the future of artificial intelligence itself. For everyday people watching from the outside, this might all sound like an abstract corporate rivalry that has nothing to do with daily life, but that could not be further from the truth. The chips being fought over right now determine which AI tools you will have access to in the coming years, how much those tools will cost, and how quickly new capabilities will reach the market. If China successfully builds a domestic chip ecosystem that rivals Nvidia, it could flood global markets with cheaper AI infrastructure, potentially undercutting American companies and shifting economic power in the process. If China fails, American chip makers could maintain a stranglehold on the industry for years to come, dictating prices and access on their own terms. There is also a national security dimension to this story that deserves serious attention. Advanced AI chips are not just used for chatbots and image generators. They increasingly power military systems, surveillance infrastructure, autonomous weapons research, and intelligence analysis at a scale humans could never match manually. A country that controls its own advanced chip supply gains a level of strategic autonomy that extends far beyond commercial competition. This is precisely why the United States government has treated semiconductor export controls as a matter of national security rather than ordinary trade policy, and it is exactly why DeepSeek's move toward chip independence is being watched so closely by analysts and policymakers alike. Meanwhile, this development lands in the middle of an already chaotic period for the global chip industry. Demand for high-bandwidth memory used in AI data centers has been driving sharp price increases across the entire supply chain, affecting everything from data center hardware down to the smartphones and laptops ordinary consumers buy every year. Every major player, from Nvidia to Samsung to SK Hynix to Micron, is racing to expand capacity while investors pour unprecedented sums of money into anything even remotely connected to AI infrastructure. Into this already overheated environment steps DeepSeek, a company that has already proven once that it can defy expectations, now attempting to defy them again on an even bigger stage. It is worth remembering just how quickly DeepSeek rose to global prominence in the first place. When its AI model first launched, it triggered a massive sell-off in American tech stocks, wiping out an enormous amount of market value in a single trading session, as investors suddenly questioned whether the enormous spending by American AI giants was actually necessary. That single event forced a fundamental reassessment of how much money truly needs to be poured into AI development, and it planted a seed of doubt that has never fully gone away. A custom DeepSeek inference chip, if it succeeds, could plant that same seed of doubt all over again. This time not about software efficiency, but about hardware dependence itself. Skeptics will rightly point out that talk is cheap and chips are hard. Plenty of companies have announced ambitious custom silicon projects only to quietly abandon them years later, once the true complexity and cost became clear. Designing a chip that can genuinely compete with Nvidia's decades of accumulated expertise, patents, and manufacturing relationships is an extraordinarily difficult task, and early-stage reports should always be treated with a healthy dose of caution. Reuters itself noted that this project remains in its early stages, meaning there is still a long road ahead before any of this translates into real deployable hardware running real AI workloads. But even if this specific chip never fully materializes, the strategic signal it sends is impossible to ignore. It tells the world that Chinese AI companies are no longer content to simply build better software while remaining dependent on foreign hardware. It tells American policymakers that export controls, while effective at slowing progress, are not a permanent solution, because necessity has a way of accelerating innovation faster than anyone expects. And it tells the entire AI industry that the next major battleground is not just about who has the smartest model, but about who controls the physical infrastructure that model runs on. Looking ahead, keep an eye on a few key signals that will tell you how this story develops. Watch for any partnership announcements between DeepSeek and Chinese chip foundries, since manufacturing capacity will ultimately determine whether this project becomes real or stays theoretical. Watch for how the United States government responds, since further tightening of export controls could either slow DeepSeek down or accelerate its determination to become fully self-sufficient. And watch how Nvidia itself reacts, since the company has enormous financial incentive to prevent any credible alternative from gaining a foothold in a market it currently dominates almost completely. There is a bigger lesson buried inside this entire story, one that goes beyond DeepSeek, beyond China, and beyond any single chip. The AI race has quietly transformed from a software competition into a hardware competition, and hardware is far harder to fake, far harder to copy overnight, and far more expensive to build from nothing. Whoever wins the silicon race will not just win bragging rights. They will control the actual pace at which artificial intelligence advances for everyone else on the planet. That is not an exaggeration. That is simply how deeply chips sit underneath everything AI touches in the modern world. So here is the real question worth sitting with after everything we just covered. If a company that shocked the world once with a cheaper, more efficient AI model now succeeds in building its own chips too, what exactly stops it from reshaping the entire industry a second time? The answer nobody currently knows for certain, and that uncertainty alone is exactly why this story deserves your full attention going forward. That brings us to the end of today's deep dive into DeepSeek's quiet but potentially explosive move into custom chip design. If this video helped you understand the bigger picture behind the ongoing chip war between the United States and China, do not scroll away just yet. Drop a comment below telling us whether you think DeepSeek can actually pull this off, because the discussion in the comments is honestly half the reason this community exists. Hit like if you want more breakdowns like this one, subscribe if you have not already, and turn on that notification bell so you never miss the next chapter of this unfolding story. We will see you in the next video.